Representative Jasmine Crockett didn't just make headlines, she made history with her fearless words on Capitol Hill. In a hearing that quickly went viral, she drew a powerful connection between modern-day ICE raids and America's darkest past, calling them what she sees as the new face of slave patrols. It's a comparison that's shaking Washington and forcing the nation to confront the uncomfortable truth about racism, policing, and power.
House Judiciary Committee Representative Jasmine Crockett from Texas.
Thank you so much, Madam Ranker, and thank you so much to our witnesses for being here today. You know, I've sat and I've listened, and what my colleague, Mr. Christian Morthy, just talked about was just blatant racism. Like, I'm gonna just call a thing a thing. Like, this administration is racist. That he has always been a racist, and that is what we are enduring in this country. Let me give you some facts behind this racism, and they get mad when I say the things that I say, but I will not stop speaking the truth. Number one, I said that what we were experiencing in this country felt like what I would imagine slave patrols to look like. And frankly, anybody that knows anything about slave patrols, this is exactly what it was like. We're talking about lawless people that are going around with no warrants or anything, and it's all about rounding people up and disappearing them. That is what's currently taking place. And interestingly enough, even though modern day policing was born out of slave patrols, when I was speaking with one of my friends who is a federal law enforcement officer, he told me that one of the things that he has observed is that the culture is created at the top. And when I think about it, it absolutely makes sense. If you have somebody at the top that will not tolerate the types of things that we're seeing, then maybe those under you won't do it. But we know that we have a racist at the top. He has called himself the head law enforcement agent in this country, and therefore everybody has decided that it is okay to take off their hoods and mask up as ICE agents. Now, we've talked about how they have hidden themselves, but again, it reminds me of the Klan. That is why I proposed the Clear ID Act, to make them identify themselves, because it is dangerous for law enforcement as well as individuals, because you don't know, especially with ICE going around and doing the things that thugs do. They're busting out windows, they're breaking into homes, they're breaking people's arms. This doesn't sound like law enforcement, it sounds like thuggery to me. But just like you can have somebody at the top that sets the tone for ugliness going down, you guys are blessed, because in the city of Chicago, you have a mayor. You have a mayor that has decided that he will not back down, he will not bend to this administration, and instead he will stand up for the people. You have a man of valor that is going up against a villain, and I think that we have to make sure, especially while we're in his city, that we recognize his leadership, because it is invaluable. Now, some people think that this is all about Chicago. But I want people to understand that this cancer is infecting us everywhere. And if you don't think that it can come to your city, well, I've got news for you. You see, we've been talking about the cruel and unusual punishment that is in violation of the 8th Amendment that is being handed out. And honestly, it's a spit in the face of every American that we have an actual convicted felon that feels aggrieved to the extent that he feels like he's owed hundreds of millions of dollars when people are literally dying under our watch. Recently, I just sent a letter, it looks like on October 22nd, to Kristi Noem. And one of the things that I laid out is that we have seen the most detainee deaths in ICE custody in a single year in decades, with 20 deaths in the last 9 months compared to 24 deaths in the prior 4 years. Now, this week, we learned that an individual who went to the Dallas ICE field office for a routine visit, meaning that they were doing things the quote-unquote right way. They were detained. They knew that this individual had diabetes and required insulin every 2 hours. Despite ICE having been told this, the individual was denied access to their medication for 8 days, resulting in hospitalization. There are some that say that we are making America great. But to me, it doesn't feel like greatness, it feels like grossness. And in fact, I want to ask a few questions, and it doesn't matter who answers them. Is it great or gross to go into people's houses and drag them out in the middle of the night?
Gross.
Is it great or gross to make people afraid to do something as simple as go to school?
Gross.
Is it great or gross to make hard-working people say, I am too scared to show up to my job.
Gross. Extremely gross.
Thank you so much to each and every one of you for your courage. Thank you so much for showing up. And Ms. O, I want to tell you that I understand that your mother is being detained in El Paso. I did go and visit that facility. I want you to know that I am always on my job. Oh, you're back.
What Representative Jasmine Crockett did in that hearing was more than rhetoric. It was a moral diagnosis delivered in plain language. When she said the ICE raids felt like slave patrols, she knew that phrase would sting. She used it deliberately to force a comparison that many in power try to avoid. The policing of Black and brown bodies in this country has a lineage. It isn't an abstract metaphor. It's a reminder that American institutions, law enforcement included, were built in ways that have often enforced racial hierarchy. Saying that aloud in a committee hearing isn't grandstanding. It's calling for history to be acknowledged as part of any honest policy conversation. Listen to the components of her case. She began with the promise of impartial law enforcement, that federal officers should act under warrant, under rule of law, with accountability. Then she contrasted it with what people are actually living through: midnight raids, masked officers who won't identify themselves, families terrified to send kids to school or go to work, detainees dying in custody because basic medical needs were ignored. Those are concrete facts, and she put them forward as evidence, not as hyperbole. The legal and ethical stakes here are straightforward. The Fourth Amendment protects against unreasonable searches and seizures. The Due Process Clause and basic humane treatment standards require that people in custody get necessary medical care. When officers enter homes without clear identification, when they break windows and use force in ways that resemble intimidation more than lawful arrests, those aren't just tactical questions. They are constitutional and human rights failures. Crockett's insistence on the Clear ID Act is crucial to understand. Requiring officers to identify themselves is not symbolic. It's a transparency mechanism that helps prevent abuse and protects both civilians and law enforcement officers. When officers hide their identity, accountability recedes. When accountability recedes, abuses are more likely to happen and harder to investigate. That simple policy fix would reduce ambiguity and give communities a concrete way to determine whether enforcement actions were lawful. But there's a deeper institutional question she raised. Culture flows from the top. If leadership normalizes aggressive, unchecked tactics, that filters down through training, informal expectations, and performance metrics. Institutions are shaped by incentives. If agents are rewarded for aggressive arrest numbers, or if political leadership publicly praises hardline actions without demanding compliance with constitutional norms, you shouldn't be surprised when local officers act like paramilitary squads rather than as accountable public servants. Crockett didn't stop at structural claims. She humanized the consequences. 20 deaths in ICE custody in 9 months, compared with 24 over the prior 4 years, is not an abstract statistic. Those numbers represent lives, families, lost trust. The story she told about the person denied insulin for 8 days until hospitalized is a moral indictment. An agency tasked with enforcing law that allows predictable medical harm in custody is failing a foundational duty. That's not merely a policy failure. It is a humanitarian crisis inside a law enforcement regime. There's also a national security angle that often gets overlooked in these debates. When communities fear law enforcement, cooperation dries up. People stop reporting crimes, stop showing up as witnesses, and stop sharing information. That makes all of us less safe. Effective public safety depends on trust. Heavy-handed, opaque immigration enforcement that frightens entire neighborhoods ultimately undermines the shared goal of keeping communities safe. Crockett's appeal to the mayor of Chicago doing the opposite, standing up, refusing to hand over residents to abusive tactics, illustrates another practical point: local leadership matters. Cities and states have tools to limit cooperation with federal immigration enforcement when that cooperation undermines public safety or violates civil rights. That isn't obstruction, it is governance. It's how federalism and local accountability can be marshaled to protect people on the ground. What should happen next? First, independent investigations. The deaths, the medical neglect, the allegation of unlawful entries and beatings must be investigated by independent inspectors general, by civil rights divisions, and by state oversight where applicable. Second, transparency. The Clear ID Act or similar policies requiring visible identification and clearer documentation of operations should be enacted and enforced. Third, policy reform. Ensure detainees' medical needs are monitored and protected by enforceable standards and independent oversight, not left to internal memos. Fourth, protect communities. Cities should be able to set clear limits on cooperation with federal immigration enforcement when it threatens public safety or civil liberties. And here's what each of us can do right now. Watch, share, pressure your representatives to demand rigorous oversight and to back legislative fixes like Clear ID and enforceable detention health standards. Support legal clinics and watchdog groups that document abuses and represent detainees. Vote with institutional integrity in mind. Hold nominees and leaders accountable for their record on civil rights and humane custody standards. This hearing was not an isolated political theater moment. It was a civic alarm bell. Jasmine Crockett was teaching a simple lesson. Law enforcement without transparency and without accountability becomes coercion, and coercion corrodes democracy. If we want a nation that truly values dignity and public safety, we have to demand systems that protect both the rule of law and the people the law is supposed to serve. If you care about this, don't let the moment pass. Share this video, call your representatives, and ask them to back independent investigations, the Clear ID Act, and enforceable detention health standards. Democracy only works when citizens are paying attention and pushing their leaders to do better. This is one of those moments where attention can translate directly into policy change and into saving lives.